The inherent truth and nature of this reality is inherently a balanced state. And if you pay attention, you will understand what it is I am pointing to you. You see, in Eastern philosophy, we have this concept, this symbol, the yin and the yang, a black fish and a white fish chasing each other. And within each of those, the opposite color resides. That is to say, even in light, there is darkness. And even in darkness, there is light. Because the yang represents the positive of the life. And the yin represents the negative. And I'm sure you understand this on a surface level, even on a conceptual level. But you understand it in an experiential level. You see, because despite the yin and the yang being two separate entities, they are one. They are encapsulated in one symbol, in one truth. And that is to say that the internal and the external are parts of one truth. The yin and the yang are part of one truth. The positive and the negative are parts of one truth. You see? So, likewise, the internal world, is a microcosm of the external world, just as the external world is a macrocosm of the internal world. So, when you take care of the internal world, it reflects outwardly in the sense that, let's take example, you meditate, you calm your nervous system down. That reflects in the external world, as in you and your physical reactions in the external world will be more calm, and your life, generally speaking, will be more calm as well. Likewise, you want to make a change in the external world. Let's say being physical, being active, running. That will have great effects on your internal world, making the heart healthier, making the body healthier, making you healthier on an internal energetic level. But what is important to remember that balance, yin and yang, unity, separation, is inherently a spectrum. If you want to think of this life, you can see it as not only yin and yang, but you can see it as frequency, as vibration. And light is a frequency, it is a vibration. So if we take the spectrum of light, or just the spectrum of visible light, for example, color, you understand that on one end of the spectrum you have red, on the other spectrum you have purple. But this is not the inherent truth of the spectrum. You see, many people like to persuade you that life is this spectrum of opposites. That on one side you have liberalism, democratism, you have good, you have bad. When inherently, just like the spectrum of light, everything in this world is a circle. You see, the truth is that light and color is not a spectrum as a linear line. It is a circle, it is a wheel. You see the color wheel, and you see that all the colors come back to itself. That is to say that purple cannot exist without red. And if you look on the wheel, purple and red are next to each other. Because purple cannot be made without red. You understand? Because purple is inherently the mixture, the in-between of red and blue. So what we perceive to be as two opposites, two very things that were quite opposite, very far from each other, are actually very close and right next to each other. That is because that is the inherent balance and the inherent truth of the spectrum is it is circular. Now, within that circle, within the separation of those colors, you have all the colors in one concept, being unity. All is one, one is all. This is true, is it not? But what is at the center of all of those colors, whether you look at it as individual or the entire thing? What is at the very center? It is white. The absence of color. The center of all the color is the absence of color. Nothingness. But it isn't nothing. We can see it. We can point to it. That is to say, we can point to that which is the absence of something. Inherently meaning the nothing. The absence of something is inherently something. So when you look at the center of everything, not just the circle of the color, not just the circle of color, but the circle of life, the circle of existence, of reality, what you will find at the center is the absence of everything. In other words, you'll find nothing. But that nothing is visible. That nothing is something. That is to say that nothing is never actually nothing. Nothing is always something. Even in our numbers, we have the symbol 0. It's symbolic for nothing. So when you look inside yourself, if you see nothing, you will realize that at the center of all life, there is nothing. And that is encapsulated not only by the division of separation, the division of yin and yang, but the unity of oneness. But what is the practical example for this? What is the real meaning of this? And how does this in fact impact our everyday life as the individual person? Well, the truth is that if you have gone into the state, if you have seen the underlying truth behind this universe and the nature of things, you realize that there was never anyone there in the first place. There was never anyone there in the first place, and that many of the illusions that were believed before have crumbled. Because in that state of awareness, that at the center of everything is nothing, you realize what you thought you were does not exist. In the sense that the ego that you believed you had did not exist, because the ego is a concept. It is an idea, but it's not something in reality. It is a social construct, a social institution, merely just a belief. You see, the ego is a symbol for an individual identity, for yourself. But dig deep enough and you will realize that that self does not exist. And merely, just as the ego is a symbol for a self, the word water is just a sound that is symbolic of water. Because, for example, you can say the sound of a gong can never be described other than the actual sound of a gong. But if I say the sound of a gong, the sound of a gong, the sound of a gong, that is not a sound of a gong. The sound of a gong is. And such is this life. Because everything exists in this life only as relation to another thing. The yin inherently exists because there is yang. And so the only reason that anything appears here is because something else appears. And in life, that is how life is constructed, in the relation of things. If something is to be perceived, it is only to be perceived because it is perceived by other things. That is to say, you only exist in relation to anything else in this universe, to everything else in this universe. If there was nothing else, there would not be this, there would not be that, there would not be any of this. Okay? And so, it's quite interesting because when this idea of self is dissolved, when it is seen through, you realize how often it is that many people in this life are trying to solve unsolvable problems. That is to say, life always exists in the spectrum, in the duality, in the sense that light cannot exist without darkness. Positive cannot exist without negative. Good cannot exist without bad. Even though that itself is inherently a social institution, a social construct, an idea, an imagination, not something that exists in reality. Because the things that we perceive as inherently good or inherently bad are just constructs of nature, something that just inherently happens. And so the problem of trying to get rid of darkness or bad or things that we see as undesirable in this world is inherently unsolvable, no? Because the light and the dark are life. To get rid of the light or to get rid of the dark is impossible because they only exist in relation to each other. It's like if I told you to get rid of the darkness, it would be like saying, draw me a square circle. It's inherently something that is unsolvable. And we see this in Buddhist philosophy, the term dukkha, in trying to solve an unsolvable problem. And that is something that I think many people who do not realize the inherent underlying truth of this are trying to go about in this life, trying to solve things that cannot be solved. Likewise, such is the nature of ego, no? It is an illusion. And in Buddhist philosophy, we have this word trishna, which means to hold on, to cling, And so many people, I believe, they hold on to themselves. They hold on to themselves so much that they strangle themselves. You understand? Giving them no room to live or to survive, thinking that they have to be this or that, holding on to an identity of what they believe that they should be. Because in the Buddhist doctrine, it is believed that clinging is what creates suffering. Desire is what creates suffering. Because if I am to live in a desireless state, that is to mean I am perfect and wanting nothing more than that which already is. But the moment I or someone starts to desire something, the moment someone says that they are not enough without something, that they are with lack because they do not have something, they're inherently putting that sense of lack on themselves. But to accept and to understand and to love and appreciate and be okay with what is now is the inherent state of life, the natural state of life. But it is only by thought and concepts that abstract that inherent truth to see it as something bad, to see as a state of lack. And so, if you are to see the inherent underlying truth of this world, you understand that the fundamental illusion of this world has been brought up by many thoughts, ideas, and abstractions of truth. And inherently, we are not to cling to that. We're not to cling to that which we see. We're not to cling to the illusion because, well, we would be back to where we were. Is it not? And then this is not to say that you have to do this or that. Quite the opposite. I'm just pointing you to something that is true. I'm not here to tell you that you have to be like this or have to be like that. It is merely something I'm telling you that will happen. It is something as a fact that I'm pointing to. As such, if you put your hand into the flame, you will get burnt, no? But if you choose to put your hand in the flame, that is all your choice. In Buddhist doctrine, we also have this philosophy of nirvana. I'm sure you've heard of it. One way that I like to translate this is as breathing outwards, breath outwards. In essence, letting go. Because inherent truth of this life is to let go is to receive. If you let go of something, it can come back to you. And likely it will. Let's say, for example, your breath. Because I like to translate this to breath out. If you breathe in and you breathe out, inherently, that breath will come back to you naturally. Notice yourself breathing. When you breathe in, you breathe out. That breathe in, that air naturally comes back to you when you let it go. But if you breathe in and hold it, what do you notice? Your breath is gone. It is not there anymore. How can it come back to you if you're holding on to it? Because there's no space for it. But when you let it go immediately, that space arises and you have space. That air comes back to you. So to achieve nirvana is inherently to let go. It is a state of non-attachment. It is a state of not holding on to things, not grasping on things. To let go of everything, even yourself, even the identity of self, even this body, even everything. Complete emptiness. You understand? And it's one thing to understand this on a conceptual level, but to really experience it, well, that is a profound thing, I suppose. It is not really something that I can explain with words, because as I said, I would just be dancing around it. I would be pointing to it, but it wouldn't be the thing itself. And so this vehicle, this doctrine inherently, the things I'm explaining to you are merely a vehicle. What I'm talking about is the concepts, the words behind what I'm talking about. What I'm trying to point you to is the inherent thing here. But the words, the concepts, the speaking here is just a vehicle to get you to that. And when let's say this is a river that we're trying to cross. And I have a boat here that I want to, and I'm using this concept here, these words here, as a boat, as a vehicle to get you to cross the river. When you cross that river onto the other side, do not try to take the boat with you. Do not try to take these words and these doctrines with you. Just be on the other side. Just be the nirvana. Because you don't need the ideas to be in that state. Rather, they just weigh you down. Just as trying to drag a boat on the land would weigh you down as well. And so likewise, I would say that if you are to go about this, if you are to do this, remember that we are not clinging on to anything. We're not trying to take anything with us. Rather, it is inherent, silent understanding. An understanding that does not need to grasp onto intelligence or information. So, and because often the words, the thoughts, the ideas that are heard merely just lead to abstractions of truth, abstractions of reality. And when you realize that the underlying truth is flow, you realize that you can flow into this life just being as you are. And after that, you are not to be anything else than that you already are. There's nothing more to explain. There's nothing more to do. Everything is inherently perfect. And that in everything is inherently a process, a circle, coming back into itself. There's nowhere to go other than here. There is nowhere to go other than here. And to realize that there was nothing and everything behind all of this the whole time never changed anything. If anything, it was just a a great remembering of what this process truly is. And so, that's the great thing about Buddhism, is that it doesn't tell you to be anything. It doesn't tell you to do this or that. If you want to live your life in a reckless way, reap what you sow. If you want to live life in a prosperous way, in a virtuous way, you'll reap what you sow. Because inherently, that is just the process of life. Process it. Be it. There's nothing more to do. One love. I'll see you later.